it doesn't really feel like it's got a swapped engine, revving up to 8,200 RPM. And there it goes! This is a BMW E36 M3. It's a stock-looking coupe that from the outside only appears modified because there's a set of aftermarket wheels, but it's got a secret. Under the hood is an S54 inline 6 from the later generation E46 M3.
A real quick explainer for those of you that don't speak BMW. Every generation of 3 Series has its own special model number, or chassis code. There's the E30, built from 1982 to the early 1990s, the E36, built from the early to the late 1990s, and the E46, built from the late 90s to the mid-2000s.
The S54 makes almost 100 horsepower more than the engine that this car came with, and it's CARB legal. What is CARB? Not a thing that sucks air through an old engine. No, it's the California Air Resources Board. And they're in charge of making sure that the air in California stays clean and that people who modify their cars don't do it in violation of EPA regulations. Now, the California Air Resources Board is important because California emissions pretty much set the standard that the rest of the country goes by. So if an engine swap or a modification is legal in California, it's legal everywhere, which brings me to the E36.
This car was built by Performance Technic. They started as a 2-man shop in the little town of Pleasanton, taking care of the BMWs they loved. They've since moved into a larger facility just across the bay from San Francisco, and today they modify and maintain everything from racing M2s to everyone's favorite E46 and even i8s. But they're not just BMW specialists. They're specialists at BMWs in California.
So California having some of the strictest rules in terms of smog, pollution, and even just driver safety. Even if your car's stock, you can't just throw an intake on it and go past smog. If that intake hasn't been CARB registered and it doesn't have a CARB number, we have to go through what's known as a state referee bar program and get the motor certified to show that it has and meets all the requirements of a 2000 to 2006 BMW in an older chassis. Thankfully, the S54, just like the S52, is an inline 6, so their footprint is pretty much the same. Here we have a Z3M wiring harness that we have converted to talk to the E36 chassis using a CAN controller that helps us convert the analog chassis signal to the digital E46 and makes them be able to talk to each other to set all these readiness codes. Another part of the swap that needs to be done is the secondary air pump. What this does on cold start for about 1 to 2 minutes, and it's like a blow dryer. It pumps hot air into the cats, warms them up, and allows them to pull all the pollution out of the exhaust gases and then out the tailpipe and it being clean. One of the last things on the swap is going to be hooking up the exhaust system, the drive shaft, the trans and everything. Thankfully, he had an aftermarket system for the E36 M3 that we were able to mate and Y into the E46 M3 headers. With this swap, we were able to use the stock E36 M3 5-speed. So from here back remains E36. As a resident of California, I'm pretty jealous that anybody else can simply just swap a motor and pay a couple $100 and life goes on. But being in California, we do have to jump through a bunch of hoops, which once you make it through all those hoops, it's a California car. You can sell it to any enthusiast in California. And given the E36 with an S54 swap, probably worth anywhere from 15 to 25 grand. But as soon as you have that California golden sticker, the car almost becomes priceless.
In Europe, the E36 M3 got a much, much better engine than the one we got here in America. In America, our E36 M3 only got 240 horsepower. Now you can modify that engine for more power, but in Europe they got 320. So the point of putting this newer M3 engine into the older M3 chassis is actually, in this case, to gain back some of what America lost in that shuffle back in the 90s. The result is an incredibly balanced 3,400 pound vehicle with 330 naturally aspirated horsepower, revving up to 8,200 RPM. There it goes! By going from just an older M3 engine to a newer M3 engine, it really keeps it familial. It doesn't really feel like it's got a swapped engine. All the gauges work, the air conditioning works, all the electronics work, and it's not slow. 3,400 pounds and 330 horsepower is a bunch. In fact, this car has substantially more power than it does brakes or handling. But at a certain point, you have to ask yourself, if you could swap in this entire powertrain into an older E30 for, let's call it $20,000, that's a lot of money, but it's a known quantity. You're not reinventing the wheel, and more importantly, you're not stressing out your powertrain by taking a much more powerful engine, leaving it stock, and then dropping it into a lightweight chassis from maybe a previous generation. You have that power delivery and performance, and you're under-stressing the stock engine rather than over-stressing your old stock engine. And while this car is actually quite a beautiful driving car, the engine is slick, the vibrations are amazing, the power is fabulous, it's by no means taken to the extreme. It's just one example. I have another example where lightness and horsepower are taken a little further.
GM makes crate motors. If you're a smart person, you put your GM crate motor in an old Chevelle. If you're a genius, like Xander Maluski, you put the crate motor in an NA Miata.
So you told me you bought this car completely stock and then basically just handed the keys to Flyin Miata.
Yeah, in 2014, this was a red automatic with a tan interior. You can tell it's changed a little bit since then.
Now, you live in California, so changing the engine typically is a problem. The E-Rod engine is designed pretty much for that, right?
Exactly right. So GM has decided that they want to sell crate motors in California, and so they took the motor through the whole approvals process. This is actually legal in anything 95 or earlier that you can make it fit.
So did you have to do anything, or was it just take the paper in and stamp?
As far as I know, this is the only E-Rod Miata in California. It's a packaging nightmare. So I had to take the car in, they looked at the E-Rod, and they spent a lot of time underneath it with a tape measure, making sure that the cats were exactly the right distance from the nearest exhaust port. Once they did that, though, yeah, it's got a sticker and it smogs as a 95 Miata now.
So the rule, I believe, if I understand it correctly, pretty much stipulates that you can run this engine in anything 95 or newer if you run the approved exhaust system as far back as the catalytic converters.
Right.
So you have to use their cats.
Their cats, you can cut and clock the pipe to make it fit.
Okay.
And so that's what was done here.
Have you been asked to pop your hood on the side of the road?
Yes.
Okay, so for those who don't live in California, this is a fear. If you mod your car, okay, if you're driving like a hooligan and you get pulled over for driving like a hooligan and the police officer suspects that you have modified your car, they can, and I believe have the right to ask you to pop your hood.
Yep.
And if they find non-CARB approved mods or a non-CARB approved engine swap, they can send you to the ref. Now, you'd already been to the ref.
I'd already been to the ref. The license plate is maybe a hint that there's something up with this car, so I get pulled over, officer walks up to the car, says, "Are there any modifications on the car?" And I just started laughing.
Yeah.
And he said, "Do you have an inspection sticker for those modifications?" I said, "Yes, I do." So I step out of the car, I open the hood, and now both officers are there, and they just look and go, "Holy shit."
You should show me what the sticker looks like.
It is buried up in the cowl
Oh, it
there.
really is, yeah. It's dug right down there. State of California, approved.
Exactly.
And they just, I guess, scan the barcode and that's it.
They scan the barcode, that EO number matches the sticker that came from GM, and away you go.
'62. Carroll Shelby takes a lightweight British roadster, puts a V8 in it, creates a legend. 1990, Mazda improves the British roadster formula by making it Japanesey reliable. Flyin Miata has gone and Shelby'd it up. Shifter's very short, the clutch throw is very short, and the turn-in is incredibly sharp. Because it's so light, you pretty much never have to go anywhere near redline. You can keep this thing at 3,000-4,000 RPM all day and be going like GT3 pace, basically. Now the good news is, Xander, the owner of this car, has done this right. One, by not going way over the top with some like 600 horsepower monster. This is a great balance for this weight of a vehicle. And two, he did the other smart thing, which is he just handed a stock Miata off to Flyin Miata and said, I'll see you in a year when it's done. Genius. Oh, there we go. It hooks up in second, keeps it going into third. Feels very good as you shift into fourth. Upshifting at 5 in this car is still making an insane amount of power. The balance is ridiculous. Like, your first thought would be big V8 in the front. Balance must be ruined. First off, you're replacing an iron block 4 with an aluminum block V8. Second of all, you have to beef up stuff in the back too. The gearbox and the differential. So although the overall weight is up about 300 pounds over a stock Miata, the balance is 52 front, 48 rear. I'll take that all day if the trade-off is I'm quadrupling the car's horsepower. Putting a newer BMW engine into an older BMW and gaining 100 horsepower, that's lovely. It's a great thing, don't get me wrong. But putting an engine that quadruples a car's horsepower and having that be CARB legal, that's what this show's about. You feel me?